It's Monday, the 22nd September 2025. A quick look at some of the headlines making waves in Nigeria today. We begin with the Punch newspaper. The leading story says, 𝐓𝐨𝐧𝐽 rejects Assembly's move to probe 6 months spending. The complete story can be found on page 2 of the Punch newspaper. Above that story says, 𝐷𝐞𝐰𝐬 refinery. Change has come to the oil sector. Nigerian economy. Otedola tells 𝐓𝐨𝐽𝐬. The complete story can be found on page 12 of the Punch newspaper. Borno terrorists attack victim hospitalized in Cameroon. The complete story can be found on page 9 of the Punch newspaper. Above that story says, crude supply to domestic refineries hit 67.6 million barrels. The complete story can be found on page 33 of the Punch newspaper. Moving over to Nigerian Tribune. The leading story says, CBN faces balancing act as costs grow for lower interest rates. The complete story can be found on page 16 of the Nigerian Tribune. Above that story says, UK, Canada, Australia recognized Palestinian statehood. The complete story can be found on page 29 of the Nigerian Tribune. Ekiti 2027, 10 APC, PDP, ADC aspirant push for party tickets. The complete story can be found on page 22 of the Nigerian Tribune. And below the leading story from the left, NIMET predicts 3-day rain, thunderstorms in Lagos, FCT, Rivers State, Delta State, others. The complete story can be found on page 29 of the Nigerian Tribune. Experts worry as AMCON's charges cost bank 377.85 billion naira in 3 months. The complete story can be found on page 6 of the Nigerian Tribune. Tinubu to declare 2025 Editors Annual Conference open. The complete story can be found on page 4 of the Nigerian Tribune. In health, we have AI can now predict who will go blind years after doctors can, says study. The complete story can be found on page 4 of the Nigerian Tribune. Oni Ladoja emphasizes need for unity among Obas in Yoruba land. The complete story can be found on page 3 of the Nigerian Tribune. Ondo NLC demands new minimum wage, writes Ayedatiwa. The complete story can be found on page 3 of the Nigerian Tribune. Moving over to the Guardian. 2027, political divisions deepen over Tinubu's reforms. The complete story can be found on page 6 of the Guardian. And above that story says, Otedola to 𝐓𝐴𝐽𝐬, adapt to change, innovate or perish. The complete story can be found on page 29 of the Guardian. Moving over to Vanguard. Crude oil imports hit record high as 𝐷𝐞𝐰𝐬 refinery reshapes trade flow. The complete story can be found on page 21 of the Vanguard. And above that story from the right, Zenith Bank's gross earnings soars. The complete story can be found on page 22 of the Vanguard. And above that story says, editorial, Otedola to 𝐓𝐴𝐽𝐬, your business model outdated. 𝐷𝐞𝐰𝐬 transforming petroleum sector. The complete story can be found on page 31 of the Vanguard. Moving over to the last paper on the list today, Daily Trust. 53 security men killed in 2 weeks. The complete story can be found on page 3 and 4 of the Daily Trust. And these are the headlines making waves in Nigeria today. If any of these headlines caught your attention, do get a copy of the paper to read the complete story.